Systems for individuals versus systems for organizations. Complexity of systems. Now, though it may seem obvious, there is a difference in the complexity of developing systems based on whether the system is being developed for individuals or developed for an organization. This will impact on the project manager or project team's approach to the system being developed at all stages of the traditional model of system development. Basically, the amount of time and resources and communication, they all will differ depending on which way we're developing, whether it's for an individual or for an organization. So we're going to try to split this up into a number of headings in order to distinguish between the two. So, firstly, in systems for individuals, we're developing for an individual user. Now, this might be multiple individual users, but whatever we are developing is meant for one person use at a time. Maybe like social media and they can share things between them. That kind of stuff would fall into this area too, but we're talking about an individual user experience. So, firstly, the system specifications. They need to be aimed at a specific user wishing to complete tasks for their own specific purpose. It could be commercial, and if it's commercial, it's for a specific target audience, but a number of individuals in that target audience for their own individual experience. Secondly is the data information. It only needs to process data of the individual user and display that information in desired format. And sometimes there's tools within the actual app itself that allow them to customize that to suit their own need, and that's what they need to factor in there. Individuals may also be able to share data between one another if it is kind of a social media type of app. Thirdly is the system development, probably a shorter time frame as the system development team only needs to liaise with the individual or the target audience they are working with in order to distinguish their needs and gain their feedback on the developing system. So they will be speaking to multiple individuals if it is going to be developed for multiple people, or if it is only developed for one person, that one person alone. But really, they're only satisfying the needs of one individual or one target audience where it's likely the needs are all aligned to the same kind of purpose. And then finally are the costs of developing. Now, it's going to be expensive if it's just for one individual because they pretty much have to cover the whole cost. If they're developing their own custom software for their own need, that's going to be very expensive out of pocket for them. More likely, we could be looking at an organization developing it for commercial individual use. In that case, it'll be cheaper because they're going to sell it commercially, in which their costs will be divided up amongst multiple individuals who purchase the product, in if that's their cost. But if it is an individual requesting their own custom software, that would be rather expensive on their behalf. Okay, we'll now move over to the other side of it and now systems developed for organizations. So here we're developing for multiple users, okay, within an organization. Okay, and that's obviously more complex because they'll all probably be using the system in different ways depending on what their roles are within that organization. So that comes up here firstly with the system specifications. Aims to satisfy the needs of multiple users within an organization who all may be using the system for different purposes based on their job roles. So they'll all be interacting with the system in a different way, but they do have to interact with one another in what they do with that data in the system so that one person to another can read the other person's data and then based on their job role, re-edit that data information, use it in a way that corresponds with their job role. So that relates to data and information. It needs to process that data of all the individual users and display the information in a format that is specific to that user's role within the organization. Different forms of data also need to be compatible with other users' data within different departments of the organization. Okay, so whether you're in the marketing department or the accounting department or the sales department, all your different data based on what is shared between the departments has to be readable and when being relevant to another department's job role. Okay, and so that itself is another layer of complexity because now we have multiple purposes needing to be factored into our system. For system development, it's going to take long to develop the system as they need to establish the system's requirements for obtaining information from multiple users within the organization and identifying their independent needs. Once again, based on their job roles, but then also probably based on as well their custom likes and dislikes about systems in order to make it a targeted system to that organization and its specific users. And then finally are the costs of development. And basically, we say enterprise system here because that's usually what these organizational systems are called. They can be extremely expensive if being custom developed for an organization, which may very well be the case. That organizations are likely to purchase a development team to make their own custom software because they want to be ahead of their own competition. All right, now this can be based on a skeleton software, such as Linux. Okay, where there are many versions of Linux out there, and then they edit it into a version of an operating system that can then be used by an organization. And Linux is basically open source freeware, and then the development team can then edit that at a cost on their behalf to make it specific to an organization. All right, but once again, commercial systems would be cheaper as well, but it would be very expensive to develop it, for an organization, and much more than developing a system for an individual who only has their own single needs. So I hope this has given you understanding the difference in complexity between developing for an individual and developing for an organization. Although it might be obvious, the real differentiating factors are an individual user has their own purpose and need to be satisfied, whereas an organization has multiple users within it that need their needs satisfied for a variety of different tasks. This obviously impacts on the data and information that's going to go through the system and who basically its end users are going to be, and thus also impacts on the cost of developing, because the scale and scope of the projects are vastly different to satisfy the needs of an individual to that of many individuals within an organization.